some called it. Some said it was, well, let's be honest. When we read these stories of Jesus, we tend to fall into a couple different categories. Some will say it's just a metaphor. It alludes to something else. Some will say, no, this is really about communion. Others will say, no, see, this is just a reference to Elisha in 2 Kings, where he fed 100 soldiers with just a few loaves. You can go to the West Bank or in the Palestine area and today and go to the church of the, I think it's the Church of the Multiplication. Odd name for a church, but it's believed to be the site, according to tradition, where Jesus did exactly what is recorded here. Now, I don't want to get into the text criticism or the historical part of this. You know, that's a wonderful study if you ever want to get into it. But instead this morning, I want us to look at what is this saying to us? Now, we have to be careful because we can't say, well, this is just something that happened long ago and, you know, it's like the old, you know, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? Who cares? Kind of a thing. And then we start focusing so much on ourselves as if to deny or replace the divinity of Christ with a good story. And so this morning I want us to look at this and look at exactly what happened, what is recorded here. Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John all record this. In fact, it's recorded two other places with the feeding of 7,000 by, was it 7 loaves and a bunch of fish. It says many fish, but I just paraphrase them there. You know, think about it for a second. I want you to put yourself in the place of the disciples. And something pretty amazing has happened. Jesus has gone off by himself. I don't think he had a AAA plan. He didn't have a GPS. They didn't know where he was going. And yet, when the people heard that he was somewhere, somehow they found him. And in that place, Jesus, who had gone off by himself to recharge, to perhaps to grieve over the death of John, has compassion on these people who have sought him out. And in that moment of compassion, he teaches, he heals, he is with them. Emmanuel, God with us, now, here. Not someday, not when everything is just right perfect, not when our feet are clean, or our clothes are mended, or we get our lives lined up. Jesus, with the crowds, healed them. But the good people who followed him, his chosen 12, they came and said, look, it's getting late. You know, I don't think we're getting overtime for this. We weren't prepared for 5,000 men plus a bunch of children and women. It wasn't in the how-to manual. Send them away. We do that in the modern church. We do that in our society. There's not enough. Send them away. The children coming across the border. There's not enough. Send them away. Healthcare. I want mine. Send everybody else away. Resources, land, water. There's not enough to go around. We're crowded as it is. Send them away. We've done everything we came here to do. Now it's our turn. Send everybody else away. And so the church does that in a lot of different ways. We make excuses about why we shouldn't be involved, or why there's only so much resources to go around, so we have to hold on to what we have just in case we might need it for a rainy day. The fact that others are getting wet isn't our problem. Now you might be thinking, well, wait a second. Didn't I just build a float? Didn't I just spend a day in a kitchen making apple dumplings? Don't I sing in the choir? Don't I teach Sunday school? Don't I serve on committees? I've done my part. Send them away. But then Jesus puts the disciples back into context and says, you don't need to send them away. Bring them to me. And in that moment of saying, bring them to me, he changes the mission of the disciples profoundly and permanently. No longer can they say, it's somebody else's job. They're not of the right club or the right color, or they don't speak the right language, or they don't fill in the blank. Jesus changes the paradigm once and for all that our neighbor's business is our concern. But don't mistake me here. This is not a heavy sermon. Really, it's not. Remember, we say this is the good news. So where's the good news, we ask ourselves?
Where's the good news?
I'll tell you. Jesus says to the disciples, bring them to me. Just as someone pointed you in that direction when Jesus said, you come to me too. In that moment of saying, I have enough for you too. The church is not about storing up treasure on earth, but in heaven. This is the good news now. Jesus says, what do you got? And they said, all we have is 5 loaves and 2 fishes. It's not enough. It's barely enough for us 12. Give it to me. Give it all to me. Now, in that moment of hesitation that we all have at one point or another when we put something in the offering plate or we agree to do something in the church. We all have that capacity, that moment of thinking, but what if? What if I don't have enough time? What if I'm too old? What if I'm too young? What if? Are you waiting for the good news? It's coming. Trust me on this. This is good stuff here. I want you to get excited about this. Because in the moment of the disciples handing him everything, what did they get back? 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But the story doesn't end there. Having blessed the food, having given it back to the disciples, then he says, feed them. Don't ask, do they deserve it? Don't ask where their tattoos end. Don't ask who their mother was or who did their daddy date before. Don't ask, are their shoes shine or, who did they vote for in the last election? Jesus doesn't ask any of those questions. And he doesn't direct the disciples to ask those questions. So by extension, we should not be asking those questions. All we are supposed to do is feed them, care for them, love them, be with them as Christ is with us. You see, sometimes we make this religion stuff so complicated. I mean, oh my goodness. Believe me, I've been there, got the textbook, paid too much for it. Argued and wrestled and wrote and did all that stuff. And it's wonderful. I'm really glad I did it. But Jesus didn't say to me, go and study more. Go and join the right church. Go and read the right version of Scripture. He said, go. Feed my sheep. But it's not just for the professionals in their robes and stoles and with the fancy headgear. You too are invited to this. So imagine this, the moment when we realize, wait a sec, I'm not just among the 5,000. I'm among the 12. Are you not excited about that? I mean, come on. You're one of the chosen ones. You get invited, as we say each month, and it's under here, do this in remembrance of me. It's not just what we can get out of it. It's what we can do next. Because Jesus never said, come this far and no further. He said, do this in remembrance of me. And so when we think, when we receive communion in a few minutes, we are reminded that this is not my table. It is not the table of this congregation or our denomination. But this is the table of the one who said, do this. And sometimes we think it's just if we do this, we don't have to do the rest. But the good news in this, and man, if you don't skip out of here doing, it's a, you know, what's that song of the South? Zippity-doo-dah. This is a zippity-doo-dah moment, church. Because we get invited into the presence of Christ. And then we get sent into the presence of our brothers and sisters. We're invited. Do this in remembrance of me. It's a commandment. Just as powerful, just as real as the rest. But so is the other one. Go. Share the good news. Zippity-doo-dah. I dare you not to be thinking about that during communion. Amen.